where this is what happened was they took relativity and ran with it because they had to. They couldn't come with anything else. It was the best anyone could come up with. In fact, they were freaking out until Einstein came up with it, which really he didn't even do that. He stole the idea from Henri Poincaré. But anyway, so they didn't take it and they start running with it. Well, and just pretend we have to assume it's true because there's no other way to explain how the Earth could be moving around the sun and us not detect it. So it must be true. Or we have to get rid of our belief system, our religion that the Earth moves around the sun. Okay, well, I don't have that religion. I don't believe in that. I'm not part of that cult. I don't feel the need to believe in things evidence say aren't true. That's weird to me. So I don't need to believe in relativity. It doesn't have any evidence. It makes a ridiculous claim on its face. Doesn't matter contract, you just can't tell. So, moving forward, relativistic prediction, we're supposed to see a star lens around the sun during an eclipse. And out of the 35 plates, 33 of the plates didn't detect it at all whatsoever. And only 2 sort of apparently did, although those plates were destroyed and that evidence was never provided. And therefore, that actually refuted relativity because all 35 of them must, it is necessitated, have detected that star with a very precise prediction from relativity if it is in fact true. So relativity was actually debunked by the very quote-unquote experiment, not a real scientific experiment, that is invoked to supposedly support it. And we could go on and on and on. Everything debunks it. You can check out Space Audit. We had him on Globebusters, right? He just now broke down how there's actually a preferred direction of the quote-unquote propagation of light. The quote-unquote speed of light has a preferred direction. That debunks Einstein. Specifically says there is no preferred direction. Everything is relativistic. There is no preferred frame of reference at all. So debunks it right there, and I actually have to utilize this understanding for what people call GPS. And it never ends, right? Michelson-Morley, and then replicated by in like 1925 through the 20s, many times, or I think 5 million times, 5,200,000 times, by Dayton Miller, showing that Michelson-Morley replicated, accounting for all variables, controlling all potential variables that could affect the outcome, show consistently the friendship changes based on what time of year it is in the sky, which that can't happen if supposedly what causes the seasons and the equinoxes is the Earth moving around the sun. It shows that effect is actually caused by the sky, and this debunks relativity as well. Again, done over 5 million times, and Einstein himself said, if what Dayton Miller is showing is true, it topples relativity from the throne. Again, the major point here is, why is it even on the throne? It's ridiculous. There's no evidence of it at all. It reifies conceptual abstractions on its face. You can't attribute physical properties to conceptual abstractions, one of which is a privation, which is the absence of nothingness. It cannot have any physical properties. Okay, that's not what this stream is about. Stream is the end of Einstein, as in, even in the modern mainstream academic sphere, Einstein is done. Now, when you talk to people, the layman, runs around and defends mainstream science, probably thinks they came from rocks and all this stuff. They will deny this and they'll try to gaslight you, make you feel stupid, but I want you to know this is how it always works. Intelligent people who think for themselves, critically assess the evidence, actually go and look and try to find the truth. They discover that major presuppositions of quote unquote science, which is actually pseudoscience and consensus and occult and religion and the opposite of science, are wrong. They're consistently wrong. And people discover that they're wrong. They start pointing out that they're wrong. They show all the evidence. But then there are people that are not capable of that intellectual individual assessment, and they run around making fun of them. Okay, that always happens, and that's all that's going to happen. But with this discussion as well. But this is fact, right? If you look into the highest levels of academia in the terms of even the local scale of physics, quantum physics, Einstein doesn't work. Einsteinian physics doesn't work, and it's well known. So what we're going to do is we're going to get straight into it, and we're going to start showing you some of these people explaining this to you. And I'm going to start off from a video. This is actually a physicist, and he's also a professor at a university in Australia. And this is from a couple days ago, and and you'll see him straight up telling you this and why. And then I'm going to show you, this is not new. Here's a video from a year ago. Here's a video from 7 years ago, right? And we could debunk Einstein in many ways. You can go check out tons of stuff. Even on this channel, we've just absolutely dunked all over Einstein. All you get back is nuh-uh. And you get back repeated, robotic, religious, cult phrases like, relativity is the most scientifically validated and verified theory of all time. It's literally not, though. It's just a saying. But if you just say that over and over, it will actually work, right? People will believe it. Who cares? Who cares what those people believe? All right, so we're going to play this video. Hopefully everything's working. Sorry if it's kind of glitching out. I don't know what to do. So we're going to watch this video, and it's very important because you're going to realize as we go through these that it has very serious implications, and it reminds me of the famous saying, the first sip of quote-unquote science will have you an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass is waiting God. Bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you, and that is what they're discovering now. Now, they cannot accept that. This is the same reason they couldn't accept the Earth is in the center, despite all empirical, physical, visual, observational evidence ever has always shown us that we're in the center. And every theory used to try to explain it away has fallen apart, doesn't work. The evidence directly refutes it over and over and over to such a point now where it's just like, oh yeah, it's always going to look like we're in the center. All the evidence is always going to show us that we're in the center. Any attempt to explain that we're not in the center will never work. But we are going to refuse to believe it because it means that there's a creator. This is the same thing that's going on here at the top levels of quantum physics and cosmology, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. We're going to cover it. Now, we covered the anything but God last relatively speaking. This is specifically the end of Einstein. It is, right? That's why there's a modified Newtonian dynamics theory that's being proposed. If Einstein's relativity was so legitimate and awesome and didn't replace it, it's because they know it has to be replaced. It doesn't work. So if you run around talking about Einstein and how stupid flurfs don't believe in Einstein, they're so dumb, relativity is such a proven scientific fact, you are just wrong and ignorant, and you will only be able to get some type of illusory confirmation from other lay people that simply are not going to look into the evidence. So there's a bit of the intro just so everyone understands. We're not trying to debunk Einstein's theory. It'll come up, of course, inevitably, but first of all, we don't have to debunk it. It was never established. It was never validated. Secondly, we've already debunked it, even giving it the unearned position as if it should be debunked. It is laughable. All right, so let's watch this video. I find it to be quite interesting. Hopefully you guys enjoy. We will pause and commentate. If you have any questions, hit me up in the chat, and we will read the super chats throughout. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Let's move from sort of simple astronomy to particle physics. And for particle physicists, one of the most exciting findings for them in the last few decades was the discovery of the Higgs boson, a particle that was predicted by the Standard Model in the 1960s, but that was undetected until 2012 when scientists working on the Large Hadron Collider sort of detected it. However, I've heard you say that, strictly speaking, the claim that the Higgs boson exists is a non-scientific statement. What do you mean by that?
Well, the correct statement would be the hypothesis that the Higgs boson does not exist has been falsified with 5 sigma confidence.
I see. So it's just a matter of being precise about the language with which we describe science and separating it from this kind of more colloquial kind of language.
Yes. So with the Higgs boson, it's correct to say today the Higgs boson exists, and we I don't want to use the word belief in science, right? But in that case, we would say I'm convinced the Higgs boson exists, just like I'm convinced that the proton exists or the electron exists, which does not exclude always the possibility that there might be a completely different mathematical construction which would also contain entities which we call protons, but which have a totally different theoretical description. Of course, we don't know whether this exists.
So he's sitting here telling you, I left this part in because it's hilarious. The Higgs boson, which people call the God particle, supposedly gives mass to most of everything that has quote-unquote mass, which is just a concept anyway. It doesn't actually exist. People just think it does. People think that you're crazy if you question it. No, it's just a theory. They call it the God particle. It doesn't exist. They just need everything to be particles, and their theory doesn't work. And this is the quantum stage, and we'll get more into that as well, because both Einstein and the current quantum theories are both dead. Objectively, they must change and be replaced. Even within the heliocentric paradigm, of course, those people willing to accept the evidence for what it is and know that we don't have to believe in the heliocentric paradigm are going to be eons above and ahead of the other groups intellectually. But anyway, and he even just sit here and lets it slip, like what we call the proton may not even be that, it may be something else entirely. It's just a concept that we have. Now, this is not just some random person, right? Now, we're not going to appeal to this guy's authority because this guy is not actually even correct, right? Like, he still is trying to explain the pseudoscience. All right.
Maybe it exists. We just don't know at the moment.
And what about dark matter, to go from particle physics now to cosmology? It's an entity that's postulated by cosmologists in order to make sense of observations that would otherwise conflict with general relativity and some other theoretical claims that cosmologists operate under, the so-called standard model of cosmology. So a lot of people are pretty convinced that dark matter does in fact exist. Are you skeptical of that statement for the same reasons you are for the Higgs boson statement of existence, or are there other reasons that come into this?
Yes, no, I wouldn't say I'm skeptical. I would say that the existence of dark matter, cold dark matter particles, has been falsified with more than 5 sigma confidence. So it's not.
So he said, you don't believe in dark matter? He said, decision of observational capability now that has, in his assessment, falsified the notion that cold dark matter exists.
There. In fact, it's much more than 5 sigma. So now, which means...
Can you tell us what 5 sigma is for those who don't remember their statistics?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so imagine you observe an apple falling down from a tree, right? And you see that for the first time, and you say, that's interesting. It's a law that it always falls down because 2 observations don't really make the decision, right? And it's been established that you've completely lost confidence if you have to do this 2 million times. That's the sort of observation. So you observe 2 million experiments of the falling of apple which detaches from the tree, and if in every single case it always falls down following the same description of how it gets fast as it falls, at that point you would say you have the 5 sigma confidence, which means that the probability that the apple will not fall down has become negligibly small. You just don't want to entertain that idea anymore because it will absolutely not be economic.
So going back to dark matter, what makes you believe that dark matter's existence has been disproven with such high confidence?
Because we've done, since 25 years, we are studying the properties of galaxies, and we've put a lot of emphasis into understanding how galaxies function. So we means myself and the collaborators I have in many countries. And there are a few key experiments you can do, experiments in the sense of the theory making very clear hard predictions, the dark matter theory, and then we can test that against the observations. And one particularly strong prediction is that if you have galaxies orbiting other galaxies and they are moving around in the dark matter halo, so every galaxy has this huge dark matter halo, and if it's moving around this dark matter halo, it will be suffering, it will be losing kinetic energies, it will be getting slower and falling towards the center of the other galaxy and merge. So this is called the dynamic of friction. It's the same as if you have a pot of honey and you put a marble into the honey, it will not accelerate downwards, but it will slowly sink. Yeah? Although if you have the same pot without honey, the ball would just fall down quickly. In the honey, it will sink slowly. So that basically the same thing happens in a dark matter halo. A galaxy enters this dark matter halo and it slowly sinks down. It doesn't accelerate fast as it should if there were no dark matter halo. So we've tested this observationally, and the effect of the slowing down is not there, yeah, with that type of confidence.
It's not there. With that type of confidence, which he said is so confident that basically you can neglect it. I really want... Now, this is what I'm saying. Like, this is what you're going to find here, okay? I'm sorry that the video's low. I'm sorry if there's something going on with the connection. I can't do anything about it. I love you guys. We will be moving soon. Hopefully everything will just continue to improve. But this is... A lot of people are like, oh man, this, like you're trying, what are you talking about, blah, blah, blah. No, this dude is being much more intellectually honest than most people. He may have still drank some of the Kool-Aid. But the point is, if dark matter's real, and let me mind you, Okay. Very simple. It's just a fact. Dark matter has to be real if Einstein's theory of gravity is correct. Has to be. We've covered this. We've covered this on this channel. We've covered dark matter. I've covered this ad nauseum, right? So just look through those stuff. So dark matter has very specific, hard predictions, if it actually exists, where it has to make the gravity work, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't slow down towards the center of the assumed dark matter halo. Now, again, just like relativity itself, it's undefined, undetected. No one knows what it is. No one can find. I mean, it's nothing that needs to be disproven anyway. But if you assume some hypothetical fairy dust and then try to fix your theory with that hypothetical fairy dust and then show us the predictions with the fairy dust that fix your problem, if we then go look and the predictions even further don't work, it's like, wait, you have to assume that there's 83% of all matter is something that can't be defined or detected to fix your gravity theory. And when you assume that it still doesn't work, you got a problem. There is nowhere else to go. You can't take dark matter out to fix the problem because you need dark matter to fix the first problem. Einstein is done. It is 2023. It is the 21st century. And this is just a fact. This is not a flat earth bias, geocentrist bias, opinion, nothing. It's just a fact. It is the end of Einstein. Even in the top levels of academia, if you want to continue to believe in this theory, you need to know and accept what the theory is. The theory is no longer Einstein's theory of gravity. That is a fact. I know I said that's a fact 5 times. Maybe people will let it sink in. Just a fact. It's buffering. I'm sorry. I can't. I don't know what I can do about it. What can I do other than like end the stream? Because apparently Rockfin's working fine, so I don't know what I can do unless they're attacking the stream. So, all right, let's continue.
And so the galaxies are.
You can, of course, just go to Rockfin. I will drop, like, someone drop the Rockfin link in the chat for me if you don't mind.
Encountering each other far too rapidly. And a case in point is the Large Magellanic Clouds, which is just now racing past our Milky Way, very close to the Milky Way, actually, and it's far too fast. So, and the Small Magellanic Clouds too.
So this was a prediction that was made by the claim that dark matter exists, and it's been falsified
yeah, absolutely.
In your view, by observation. So why do people still, in your view, cling on to this idea of dark matter existing?
Well, that's an interesting sociological problem which one would like to understand because it has no rational basis. It is non-rational.
I mean, this dude is being so legitimately honest. It's kind of like scary for him. I'll throw these on and see if these are any good. All right, let's keep going.
So this was a prediction.
Pay attention to this part.
Prediction that was made by the claim that dark matter exists, and it's been falsified
yeah, absolutely.
In your view, by observation. So why do people still, in your view, cling on to this idea of dark matter?
Well, that's an interesting sociological problem which one would like to understand because it has no rational basis. It is non-rational, and it's probably...
It's non-rational. It's almost religious zealotry. It's like it's a cult.
Related to sociological pressures in the community. So when students
sociological pressures in the community. Oh man, you mean like the people that are scared to even entertain alternative cosmologies because they are actually intellectually insecure, so they must then try to create some public illusion that they are intellectually superior by attacking those who are actually more informed than them? You mean the same exact type of sociological pressure that creates this echo chamber of cult-like religious reified beliefs amongst all the pseudoscientific communities that are falsely called science? The same authorities that people appeal to? You mean the same type of sociological pressure that doesn't even allow you to publish papers if it doesn't push the same propaganda that you're supposed to believe in within this cult? No way.
So they study and then they want to do a research project. They are, for one thing, attracted by the interesting ideas and possibilities of doing research, and the other by how great the group looks like they would like to join. So it's tribal thinking, and that pulls a lot of young...
Tribal thinking? I thought scientific thought was the opposite of tribal thinking, and you were actually supposed to be encouraged to question the status quo and the consensus because science isn't about consensus. I thought tribal thinking was primitive and archaic and religious type of dogmatic approach to things. It's almost like modern cosmology is a religion and it's dogmatic and it's not scientific. And by the way, I'm just trying to let you guys know, you may be new to this channel, and I know we're going to get a lot of new people coming to this channel in the next 6 months. This is the deal, man. It's okay, just let it go. Because if there's a group of people that are refusing to look at the evidence honestly, and then they're so desperately trying to attack other people that dare question it and attacking people, well, if there's a group of people over here that are pointing out this for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and saying, we already know that, we found it's obvious that it's wrong, they're in a cult, they're in a belief, they're not allowed to think outside of it, right? Like the heliocentric model, for example, is way more than the idea of relativity. You think relativity's dogma's bad. Question if the earth moves around the sun. Oh my gosh, you're going to get railroaded. Okay. If there's a group of people that have been knowing this whole time and telling you the whole time, maybe you should step back and reconsider what those people are presenting to you. Don't you think that may be an intelligent and humble way to approach the situation? I think it may.
People into an established thinking, because just that's where they can have a career, that's where the funding is, that's where the leaders of the field are famous, they get prizes, and that's a self-strengthening system in a scientific establishment which relies on competition for funding. And that is simply, and I think that's the whole fallacy of the situation, that comes from American United States. This concept of competition for funding in the sciences is the most stupid idea you could have even.
Bro, this dude is cool, man. I'm not gonna lie. At the beginning, he shows how incredibly ignorant he is about the subject of flat Earth. It's funny because flat Earth was involved in this conversation. Flat Earth is on Tucker Carlson. I'm letting you guys know it's about to happen. It's about to happen. Savor the calm before the storm. But this guy is speaking so much truth right now, bro. He is on our team. Like, do you hear what this dude is? He's calling out that all of these different universities and these quote unquote scientists and all these different organizations, they're fighting for funding. So they know that they can't get approved for the funding unless they're suggesting that they're investigating a way to further push the accepted consensus, the propaganda, and that this is an incredibly stupid idea because it's nothing but detrimental to real science. This dude is freaking crushing right now, bro. So just... his name is right here, Pavel Krupa. You can look him up, and let's just look up his credentials right now so everyone can see them. So he is an Australian astrophysicist and professor at the University of Bonn in Australia. Australian astronomer. Yeah. We appeal to authority until they don't say what the cult allows them to. Then authorities don't matter, and random anonymous haters on the internet can now call this guy a quack, even though they just appealed to the idea of the authority of scientists and consensus. Yeah, history will reflect you guys are lame.
Just that's where they can have a career, that's where the funding is, that's where the leaders of the field are famous, they get prizes. And that's a self-strengthening system in a scientific establishment which relies on competition for funding. And that is simply, and I think that's the whole fallacy of the situation, that comes from American United States. This concept of competition for funding in the sciences is the most stupid idea you could have even thought up, because that's absolutely not how science works. In order to discover the laws of nature, you cannot compete with anybody. You can only follow your intuition and work on that for as long as it takes to develop and have scientists competing for funding in order to improve our understanding of nature. That's just the most stupid idea ever brought up in terms of...
This dude is just OG, bro. Like, oh wait, so people have to trust their intuition, use their pattern recognition, think intellectually outside of dogma to make new discoveries, and that's the actual philosophical approach required to interpreting scientific evidence, and that's the only way you can make progress in science. So whenever people like me sit here and say, well, actually, light doesn't travel. That's why we have superluminal observations, because light isn't some type of corporeal physical particle. It isn't traveling from point to point. It's nothing more than a perturbation of the background medium. It has different modalities, different vibrational resonances and excitations created that with a different spectrum within the EMF spectrum, or the EMR spectrum that we call light, and it's actually instantaneously there. It's nothing more than excitation or perturbation, specifically a rate of induction, and that actually that this entire all-encompassing field of energy is the pure potential state at which all energy comes from, and everything has a fractal commonality of geometry, which is actually a torus, which is made up of two conjugate geometric expressions, which is a centrifugal divergence, centripetal convergence overlapped on top of each other, and this fundamental torus or double torus makes up all things, and it is the fractal basic geometry of all things, and that there is no such thing as little physical particles. In fact, matter is nothing more than a more condensed, what we call matter is more condensed version or modality of this. When I start to say these kind of things, sure, I'm speculating at times. I'm looking at the evidence and I'm piecing the puzzles together, right? If we have a vacuum chamber, and then we can actually use the concept of molecules and atoms, which are all pseudoscientific concepts we use and reify to quantify and count things, right? If we use that and we see this much air has this much energy, then we go take as much air out as we possibly can, and we know there's still a little bit of air in there, but basically no air. It's as close to no air as we can get, and we can use the number by measuring the pressure within that certain volume of a vacuum chamber. Okay, well, there's this much pressure, so there's, based on our well-established predictions of this much air gives us this much energy, there should be this much energy in the vacuum chamber, and we see there's way more than that, and we see that there's a waving motion. Well, waves are not things. They're just a type of movement. It's not a noun, it's a verb. I can wave my hand, not hand to wave. So either you have water moving or you don't have the wave of water. You can't pull the wave out of the water, which means there's something in that vacuum chamber that is waving. What is waving? Requires some type of medium. Well, of course, that's what all evidence has always shown us. There's an etheric background medium. And this is my point. When I speculate that, am I claiming to have all the answers? No. Am I very confident in my positions? Yes. Do I update them? Yes. But people like myself, people like many people in this community, are what science is. Ironically, we get called science deniers, but just like this guy's pointing out, we are the scientists. So just cry about it.
Of our civilization. You can do that in economics. You get a better product, and that will be bought, and then you invest into that, but not in science. Absolutely not. Science is art. A scientist, a brilliant scientist, paints a picture, which is the theory. For that, they sometimes have to invent their own tools, like Newton had to invent the mathematics to actually do the
You said I would bet money he isn't a flat earther. I just said, yeah, he isn't a flat earther. At the beginning, he gives an example of like, well, the flat earth theory, the flat earth idea, or the round idea, and he uses an analogy of like how you become sufficiently confident in something to then build your ideas off of that. But I can guarantee you, he hasn't really fully researched flat earth. He's just looking at this other stuff, right? He's an astrophysicist. He's just been like, but the point is, he's exercising intellectual integrity here, and it sounded like the person interviewing him was like, you may be jumping the gun on thinking flat earth is stupid. I'm just letting you know. It's just the calm before the storm. But I don't care if he's a flat earther. We're actually currently discussing something else, right? So can't exclude people because they don't agree with you on everything, or then you can't actually discuss anything with anyone.
Which you did falling apple with the motion of the moon, and that's what one has to do today. Have to allow the scientists to work creatively, and the question is, how does one sell this concept that you allow some people to be supported by the taxpayer to do that? It looks like a holiday. People just dream off. They go on a ship for 3 years and just dream up some ideas funded by the taxpayer. Right? Doesn't sound right. On the other hand, that's actually the basis of how our civilization understands what's happening out there.
So let's get back to the kind of scientific motivation for dark matter, putting aside all these interesting kind of claims about the sociology behind it. Dark matter was originally postulated to explain some observations that didn't seem to make sense with the theory of gravity that we had. What's the alternative? Do we need to abandon our theory of gravity? Do those observations mean that that's wrong?
Well, given the scientific deduction that dark matter does not exist with more than 5 sigma confidence, one cannot consider that model further, and so we have to indeed consider how can we explain what we observe out there. And so the next thing we do is to look at another proposition which was formulated by Milgrom in 1983. It's a different law of gravitation. People call it the modified Newtonian.
This is the part where it gets into specifically the end of Einstein. And I do want to remind everyone, and yes, YouTube is for sure messing with the stream. Again, I saw people drop the Rockfin chat. Rockfin is running smooth. You could technically have them both pulled up, communicating there and communicating on my Telegram and communicating in Rockfin. We're going to get them to try to fix the chat a little better there. But YouTube's doing it because I just checked all of my connections. They're all ace. So yeah, let's just put it together. Rockfin has way less processing capability as a company than YouTube, and yet Rockfin's working perfectly fine and YouTube's not. So it speaks for itself. But I just want to remind the whole point of the stream, because I definitely digress. I'll be the first to admit it is the end of Einstein, and specifically at even if we dip off in real evidence, sometimes even real scientific experiments, and they're trying to interpret them. They're not some big collaborate lying conglomerate of people. They're just misled. They're lost in the sauce, right? So this mainstream heliocentric paradigm that people call you crazy for not believing in, I'm saying that within that paradigm, it is the end of Einstein. It is the end of Einstein. This is a fact, bro. It is a fact. And when you come across people on the internet that will try to intimidate you away from questioning, like, for example, the heliocentric model and mainstream cosmology, they will never say that Einstein's over. That's how you know it's a waste of intellectual energy to even truly take them seriously. They're just ignorant of their own position. Einstein is over. It's the end of Einstein. So here we're going to get more into that specifically. Then we're going to continue throughout the rest of the videos, commentating, showing that that is the case. Again, this is the point that within that paradigm, it is the end of Einstein.
Equivalence with Newtonian gravitation. And that's what we are doing. So we are working now to develop a new cosmological model with the basis of those equations of motion, because just like Newtonian gravitation, we get equations. We can type into the computer the differential equations which the particles have to follow and solve. So we can do that in Mond.
Oh, I want to say this too to a lot of the truthers here who have woken up to a lot of this stuff. We do see stuff move in the sky, and they move in relation to each other, and we can come up with equations to show exactly how they move in relation to each other to such an extent that it maps it out. And that's a consistent cycle. And so based on all empirical evidence we've ever observed, in order for something to move around something else, that needs a cause. Okay. So yeah, we don't deny gravity if you're properly defending, for example, my position, which is that the Earth is a geocentric stationary topographical plane that's within a contained system. Gravity means heavy, gravitas, heavy. Well, things are heavy, they have a certain heaviness, they have a weight, what we call weight, right? So we don't deny gravity, we don't deny gravitas, we deny gravitation. Now, get ready here. Truth is that there may actually be a central source of energy that causes everything to move around it, near Polaris. But if you have a background, what that will do is create a reaction, meaning you will have an action and a reaction. There's a ripple. Everything reciprocates. All energy entails reciprocation. Its fundamental reason for this is that pressure mediates. So pressure mediation results in reciprocation. Okay, so there is in fact something, and they will never get close to figuring out what it is until they acknowledge what I just stated, which is that there is not just a singular action, there's an action and a reaction. And this is why they can't explain. You can't explain that if there's an action and a reaction for the motion of the stuff in the sky, the Earth has to be in the center. Even Newton himself said that. So I do want to point that out because I feel like a lot of people overlook that. Now, do we have some type of scientific burden to do that? No, because actually you can't science the sky. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue knowledge and understanding. Where would flat Earth be nowadays without Dubé? That's a good question. Eric Dubé was a legendary part of all this. Faye Holiday, welcome to Miss Wit Level 2. Hey, welcome to the Miss Wits Level 2. Thank you so much. All right, let's continue. And then we're going to go on to the other videos.
Conditions. One boundary condition is there's a hot Big Bang. CMB is the photosphere of the hot Big Bang. And then structures evolve as the universe expands in a traditional manner. And then we can apply, instead of Newton plus dark matter, because it's all non-relativistic, we apply Milgromian gravity without dark matter, and study the structures which form. And the calculations which we've done show that what we observe, so the population of galaxies comes out just right. Yeah? You get these disk galaxies with the correct properties. You get the correct number of galaxies as a function of mass.
The reason they do that is because they have to account for real inertial forces. There's an angular momentum, and they just claim that they can just treat it as real inertial forces, but they aren't real inertial forces. But there's an angular momentum of the cosmos moving around the sky. This gives you an action and a reaction. The Earth is in the center. Everything is moving in relation to it within an etheric background medium. The longer that people deny it and refuse to accept this fundamental aspect of what we see, the longer we will run around and fairy tale land.
And the correct density of galaxies around us. So that's most remarkable and exciting. And so we now will continue this by looking at whether we need to relax, whether there are some tensions with this picture. This needs larger scale calculations. Was there a Big Bang? And so on.
So this theory is called the modified Newtonian dynamics. Does that mean that we're going, instead of making the leap from the Newtonian paradigm to Einstein, we're just modifying Newton? What's the right way to think about it?
Well, I think
the paradigm.
Yeah, the way I think about it is that the correct one. I don't know, but it modifies it in the sense of putting into the equations that the accelerations change when the curvature of so the gradient of the potential. So the curvature of space becomes nearly negligible, yeah? And that can be put into.
You have to understand what they're actually saying is that the motion within the background medium becomes negligible because you can call waves curves. And that's all they did was hijack the medium, call it space, thus emptiness, thus the concept, try to still keep the physical properties of a background medium, which has a tenuity beyond comprehension, according to Tesla. Tenuity meaning thinness, the primary substance, a gaseous-like substance that has a tenuity beyond comprehension, thus its fluid-like properties. And waving is a motion within that, and it has an action and a reaction, and then they tried to quantify curved as if it is always there. But it is important to notice that it is the motion that causes the waving, and in fact the waving causes the motion, to be more specific. So it is something causing the motion within the background. I know this is I shouldn't even do this right now, I'll be honest. I'm just going to give you guys this right here, and you can take it or leave it. I know some people will appreciate the potential profundity of it. Okay, there's some primary source of energy, a life-giving force, if you will. It is setting the motion into the background. Okay, just like Tesla would even say. He called it prana from Eastern mythology type of beliefs. The prana, the life-giving force. I would obviously call it Yah, the creator, the life-giving force, the fundamental source of everything. Okay, there's the background, or what people call the ether, and then there's the life-giving force. This sets the background into motion. That motion then ripples or creates what we call waves. Waves aren't things, they're motion. It creates a waving motion within this background ocean. Okay, this motion then causes the motion of what we see in the sky. That's right. Take it or leave it, you know.
A non-modifiable generalized Poisson equation. And the way I think about it is that Einsteinian gravitation, so Einstein postulated that we understand gravitation as a consequence of curvature of space and time, but that's just one possibility. There are other possibilities. Gravitation could be an emergent phenomenon from the different regions of space having different information content. That's from Verlinde, or because particles are waves, and so they react to changes of refractive index, which they themselves change because there are oscillations in some medium. You could call it the ether, if you like. And so the thing is that...
What a coincidence, bro. What a coincidence.
And that can be put into a non-modifiable generalized Poisson equation. And the way I think about it is that Einsteinian gravitation, so Einstein postulated that we understand gravitation as a consequence of curvature of space and time, but that's just one possibility. There are other possibilities. Gravitation could be an emergent phenomenon from the different regions of space having different information content. that's from Verlinde, or because particles are waves, and so they react to changes of refractive index. So the thing is that gravitation is the least well understood phenomenon. I wouldn't want to call it a force because it might not be, it doesn't seem to be a force. So it's the least understood phenomenon. So it's not surprising that the one formulation which is currently favored, the Einsteinian formulation, fails. That's just no surprise. It could have worked.
Yeah, it's no surprise. Look, I'm just gonna tell you, man. Something's making stuff move around, and it's the thing. It's my opinion, okay? Speculation station. For all those like who know how to repeat the science script and just want to come for me, okay? Speculation station, bro. It is an emergent property, and that's okay. So the waving itself is an emergent property. It emerges from the primary source that sets things into motion. Okay? Waving is in the background medium. What people are calling gravitation is just an effect. It's a reaction. It's emergent. It's an emergent property from that background that's oscillating, vibrating, waving. Okay? And nothing doesn't exist, so it certainly can't be waving. Okay, so it is an emergent property, and it thus must have an action and a reaction. And if this is true, which it must be in terms of physics, the Earth has to be in the center. It has to be in the center. If there is an action and a reaction and an emergent property from this background fluid-like medium, the Earth has to be in the center. There's no way around it. Someone said within the firmament. I think that the firmament has layers, and it's basically plasma-like, which is what we call ionized gas. It has different modalities, and just like we can take helium, which is the lightest gas, and you can turn helium into fluid, and you can get a superfluid, and then you can even continue it, and it turns into more of a solid structure. I think that it just increases with solidity as you get higher, and I think all of this happens within that. I think that the very center of the torus field, you can get outside of it. And I think that the crater may be within that or the primary source of energy. Speculation station, let's move on to how this is the end of Einstein within their own paradigm. Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. So this was 2 days ago. We covered it. I didn't finish it, but you can watch more of it if you would like. And then we're gonna come over here to this video and show like this is not a new idea. This is well known. You can actually go to Mindshock. He buries Einstein. There's all kinds of ways to bury current Einsteinian mechanics and dynamics and theories. But anyway, let's kind of check this one out. And then we have a few more for you. This is a bunch of cosmological problems within their meaning. This is the people admitting, oh, well, yeah, Einstein's wrong. Dark matter doesn't exist. This is even another one about how Einstein's wrong on Lex Friedman's show. And we might not watch all of these. Here, we can go ahead and play this one.
When we got news from many physicists had a heart attack when we got news from Geneva, Switzerland, that Einstein might be wrong. All hell broke loose in the physics community. Every physicist I know is taking a position on this hot topic because relativity is the foundation of modern physics, along with the quantum theory. Now, what they found was, if you take a beam of neutrinos from the atom smasher in Geneva, Switzerland, shoot the beam through the mountains from Switzerland to Italy over a distance of 454 miles, the neutrinos outraced a light beam by a distance of 60 feet. 60 feet over a distance of 454 miles. Well, that doesn't sound like much, but to a physicist, this is a disaster. It means that the foundations of modern physics have to be called into question.
And of course, this assumed invariant speed of light is retarded. Someone said Mindshock's just covering Run Cowie. I think his name is Run Hey, cow. Yeah, he buries relativity. That's right. But it's just kind of, it's like light work at this point. You can bury relativity with the simple fact that he attributed physical properties to conceptual abstractions such as space, which is the idea of nothingness or emptiness, quantified concepts that can't have properties, and time, a concept we use to quantify change, passing, and motion. They cannot have physical properties. That's why it is fundamentally different from the idea of the ether. You said idea. Yes, it is an idea. It's the word ether is an idea. But what the idea is that's postulated is not that ideas have physical properties, but rather a substantive fluid-like medium where these physical effects are emergent from that primary source. They are fundamentally different. One has logical viability and consistency and coherency. One is fundamentally impossible logically. What's it really AI? Good one. All right, here we go.
In modern times, no figure has more prominently represented the title of genius than theoretical physicist Albert Einstein, Time magazine's man of the century. Einstein's theories of special and general relativity continue to shape much of cosmology's theoretical framework. However, contrary to popular claims, not all experiments have, quote, confirmed Einstein's theories. Indeed, in a Space News episode earlier this year, physicist Wal Thornhill discussed the recent experimental confirmation of so-called spooky action at a distance, or quantum entanglement. Countless science headlines around the world declaring that Einstein was wrong. However, as Wal Thornhill discusses in this two-part episode, at the 100th anniversary of Einstein's theory of relativity, the belief that Einstein was right continues to endure.
Recent news headlines celebrate the 100th anniversary of Einstein's theory of relativity. But what really is there to celebrate? There have been no fundamental scientific breakthroughs in that time. Relativity and quantum theory remain as incompatible as ever. If Einstein was wrong, we have wasted a century. So a recent experiment is important because it discredited Einstein's relativity theory again. Only this time, all loopholes in the experiment were closed. The concept in quantum physics he disliked most, force, that connects separate bits of matter instantaneously. Einstein
Would be dope to utilize a whiteboard for some of your streams. Yeah, I do have one. I'm thinking about integrating that actually and even throwing on a lab coat for schooling Globers, but it'll be in the new house with the new setup.
Einstein's speed of light is not the barrier he postulated. The universe is a coherent connected system. To progress once more, we must forget Einstein. It's a thankless and supremely difficult task to question the long-held beliefs of authorities, and there's no stronger faith.
Let me address one more thing. Someone said I need to just go let him know how easy it is to put it to rest. I'll put it to rest right now. We don't need a debate. I'll put it to rest right now. Okay? If the reason that things fall is because the Earth is actually moving up, which is just an unfounded claim that you have to assume and beg the question start with, just like they assume with the Earth, then why do objects fall at different rates at the same location? It has been measured with very precise interferometry that the same objects will fall in the same conditions as inside of a vacuum chamber, inside of a building. They'll drop a little BB, use interferometry lasers to measure how fast it falls, and the rate at which it falls will change, and the rate at which things fall is different throughout the Earth. That proves the Earth cannot be moving up to cause objects to fall down. There you go. What is the Earth speeding up and slowing down, but just in different parts of the Earth all at the same time? It's game over. Objects fall at different rates at the same location. So tell Dell, just let it go, bro. It's just ridiculous. All right.
Than that Einstein was a genius of the nation. The real story of Einstein would make a good sequel to Monty Python's parody of True Believers in the film Life of Brian, where no amount of argument or contrary evidence would sway the adulatory crowd. Like the hapless Brian in the film, Einstein denied his worshippers to no avail. Einstein is reported in the Scientific American of August the 23rd as having said, "I am no Einstein." But the author John Horgan, as a devotee, added reverently, "On top of all his other qualities, the man was modest." Why is it that people hang on his every word on any number of unrelated subjects, but on this most personal subject he was ignored. Unfortunately, students of the physical sciences are so busy mastering the basics of their chosen field.
All right, this guy's a little boring. We may move on back to him. There's a lot of the problems with modern cosmology. Let's listen to a few minutes of it.
One of the most important pieces of evidence for dark matter as a particle is seen in the light that comes from the very early universe. The cosmic microwave background radiation reveals a lumpiness that tells us how matter pulled itself together under its own gravity at the early...
Now, what the lumpiness actually shows is that the Big Bang model is actually wrong because it claims that it should be isotropic and homogeneous. Yet, the lumpiness shows us that it's anisotropic, meaning it has a preferred direction, and that it's inhomogeneous, meaning it's not evenly distributed. Now, this is what they do. This is classic wizardry. You see, the strongest evidence that dark matter is a particle is that our Big Bang model doesn't work. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't say, well, we have to try to think that dark matter is a particle because there's no other way we can theoretically come up with to explain how the observations of the background radiation specifically refute our Big Bang cosmology. They spin it. This is Wizardry 101. Take the thing that refutes your model and then tout it as evidence or proof of your model. No one will think to look there. It's insane. So that's what he's actually saying. Okay, because the lumpiness, it's called anisotropic and inhomogeneous distribution, which is the exact opposite of what was predicted by a Big Bang cosmology. And one of the millions of reasons why they need dark matter and need it to be a very specific thing, but can't detect it, can't define it, can't find it. You get it.
Earliest times. Back then, light and matter were locked together due to their extreme densities. Regular matter was kept from collapsing into any structures by the pressure of the intense radiation of that era. But dark matter doesn't interact with light, so it would have been able to collapse just fine. And after the universe had expanded and cooled enough for regular matter to be released from the clutch of light. But if dark matter isn't real and regular matter controls gravity completely, then no structure should have been able to form at those early times. For this reason, most forms of MOND, including Tevis, come up short.
Are you seeing what's going on? MOND is modified Newtonian dynamics, which is a popular attempt to replace Einsteinian gravity because it doesn't work and it's so fundamentally flawed and the evidence for dark matter is so lacking and no one can even comprehend what it should be and there's no evidence for it at all. And then whenever they assume it's real, even though they can't define what it is for almost a century now, that's science being stagnant for 100 years, claiming something's there that you can't find, and then not defining it, never finding it, never observing it, never having evidence for it, assuming it's true because if it's not, going and trying to apply the predictions built upon the assumption that dark matter is a real thing, because if it's not, again, then your theory's not going to work. That's a religion. And then those theories, or those predictions that come from the assumption that dark matter is a real thing, don't work, specifically don't work, just like the previous video we watched explains. So then they start coming up with a modified Newtonian dynamics to try to explain away the need for dark matter because the dark matter assumption doesn't even fix the problems. And then that doesn't work to explain their Big Bang cosmology, their made-up creation story of how everything started. It's not a religion, but they make up creation stories without evidence in the face of the actual evidence and refuse to entertain alternatives dogmatically. But it's not a religion, though. It's science.
And this is where the new guys come in. In 2020, Konstantinos Skordas and Tom Zloznik proposed a new relativistic version of MOND. And just last month, their paper passed peer review. Their big change was that they allowed the scalar field to change its behavior over time. They managed to tweak their equations so that in the early universe, the field behaved a bit like a type of matter, which Zloznik calls dark dust.
So literally, dude, just put dark in front of any word and claim it's there with no evidence, and somehow this is science, bro.
It was able to...
Why do they have to do this? Because the heliocentric model doesn't work.
Clump in the right way to kickstart cluster formation, but then later its behavior shifted so that it now behaves more like Bekenstein's Teves proposal. More work is needed to see if the newly dubbed RelMOND, relativistic MOND, works for galaxy clusters and keeps stars from exploding, but the authors are optimistic. Okay, so problem solved. We don't need dark matter anymore? Not so fast. Modified gravity theories still can't explain the bullet cluster, and I don't have time to get into that, and we've covered it before, so I'll just say that when two galaxy clusters collide and the dark matter gets ripped away from the light matter, it makes you doubt that dark matter is just light matter acting funny. Of course, there are Mond proposals which claim to address this, but the bullet cluster might be the most awkward result for modified gravity folks. At this point, the two theories are in a bloody theoretical knife fight, where the knife...
All right, look, it doesn't work. None of it works, bro. It's obvious why you have a fundamental assumption that you guys all assume and don't even re-examine, and that is that the Earth's a tilted, wobbling, spinning ball revolving around the sun in an ever-expanding vacuum of nothingness tucked in an insignificant corner that doesn't matter, and it just looks like it's an illusion that we're in the center. And whenever you come up with that idea and that everything started from a singularity and exploded and expanded out, but in reality, we can't actually... explain how any of it would even happen in theory, and we claim that everything exploded and expanded from a single point, but simultaneously claim that there is no center. When you guys assume all of these ridiculous, fallacious, made-up, pseudoscientific, dogmatic belief systems and don't even dare re-examine them, all of your theories, every single attempt that you go forward with will not work. You're wasting time. All right, let's move on.
The main trouble I have with string theory is I don't think it's physics.
What's more interesting is that Sir Roger Penrose doesn't even believe in the idea of cosmic inflation and suggests that cosmic inflation is nothing more than a fantasy.
For example, you refer to inflation, that very fast inflation, as a fantasy. Do you still believe that?
Well, I'm been trying to write a book for about 10 years for the Princeton University Press called Fashion, Faith, and Fantasy in the New Physics of the Universe.
Oh, this is not a nobody, by the way. Roger Penrose. Let's just look him up for you guys. This is I'm showing you top level people within their paradigm, which is why this is called the end of Einstein, and it is again within their own paradigm. It is the end of Einstein. So, well-revered British mathematician and mathematical physicist, philosopher of science, and Nobel laureate in physics. This is not just some random dude. Okay. So, anyway, he's trying to write a book called what do you call it? Something, Faith and Fantasy in the New Physics of the Universe. And let me come over here and explain this to you. He's saying that the inflation theory is a fantasy. And I covered this recently. This series covers all these subjects that are being discussed. It's almost as if we're not so crazy. We know what we're talking about. We've done a lot of research, and we're just trying to bring the truth to the light because people are being suppressed because of dogma. It's danger dogma because it has philosophical implications, which makes people think they're insignificant. But the point here is, I explained, right, why they need inflation, and they call it there's something called the inflaton at the beginning of the universe. Well, because there was the flatness problem. The idea that if everything explodes out, if I throw a grenade, it'll explode out in all directions. It's not going to explode out and then be flat. It would be curved, either positive or negative curvature would come from this explosion type expansion. But the universe from within their paradigm is flat. And that doesn't make sense. It's called the flatness problem. And in fact, it is measured within their own methods of quote unquote measurement, which is calculative assumption, that it is measured to be 0.0000070 zeros, 1 flat, like that close to 0, which is perfectly flat. So it's this close to 0. 0 is perfectly flat. It's 0.07001. That's how close it is to perfectly flat. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. It's called the flatness problem. The exact amount of energy density required to do that makes no sense. Defies mathematical statistical probability. Doesn't work within their paradigm at all. It's called the flatness problem. What did they do? They said, oh, well, it didn't expand out flat. It was actually curved, but there was inflation at the very beginning, which straightened out the curve, so we just can't tell. It looks like it's flat. They used inflation to also explain away the horizon problem, which is that there's a finite distance, right? There's a finite cosmological horizon, a distance in all directions from a singular point, that a particle couldn't have traveled any further than that because you have the age of the universe, 13.5 billion years. You have the supposed maximum speed of information or any particle or light, which is c. So you have the finite time, the finite speed claims, which means you have a finite distance, which means if you went as fast as you could for as long as you could only go so far. But that's a very small portion of this CMB, the entirety of the quote unquote universe or the cosmos, which means these particles couldn't have interacted with other particles super far away because they didn't have the time to get there, even if they were traveling as fast as they possibly could within their paradigm. But they would have had to interact to have a homogeneous, evenly distributed energy, right? So their cosmology imploded on itself because these particles had to all be at the same place and then spread out evenly and distribute evenly, but they couldn't within their own paradigm. That was called the horizon problem. Inflation was a made-up idea thrown in to save the model from the flatness and horizon problem and many other problems. Okay, this is a religion, and we covered this recently. There's obviously no evidence for such a thing. It's all just made up. They just constantly shift the goalposts. It's just a religion. It's like the Catholic Church changing their doctrine over the years. But anyway, so this guy's obviously not being printed by the Princeton Press for obvious reasons. But again, he's just a Nobel laureate. What does he know? Within your own paradigm, it's well known that Einstein is dead, and that your current cosmological understanding with the application of relativistic gravity is dead, and that modified Newtonian dynamics gravity doesn't work. You know what does work? A geocentric Earth that's not moving. All of a sudden, it works again. Well, isn't that crazy?
And been trying to write a book for about 10 years for the Princeton University Press called Fashion, Faith, and Fantasy in the New Physics of the Universe. And the fantasy is mainly to do with inflation. That's true.
That's true. Science was so interesting, I dismissed any logical reasoning, denying purpose and intelligent design. Woke up after, quote, everything is connected. In my opinion, closest to actual, quote, theory of everything. Thank you. Much love. Yeah, Yaboa. Probably wrong, but thank you for the $10 super chat. And yeah, everything is intrinsically connected vibrationally, I would say.
Explaining certain phenomena in the universe, but scientists believe that dark matter might not even exist. So why does Roger Penrose reject Michio Kaku's string?
So, you deny the science. Scientists believe that dark matter may not even exist. Yeah, like pick and choose.
The fantasy is mainly to do with inflation. That's true.
Dark matter is important for explaining certain phenomena in the universe, but scientists believe that dark matter might not even exist. So why does Roger Penrose reject Michio Kaku's string theory? Why does he say that cosmic inflation is a fantasy? What groundbreaking research has Sir Roger Penrose conducted on black holes, and why are scientists still uncertain about the existence of dark matter? Let's dive in to find out. Our universe is composed of matter, which upon closer examination consists of particles. These particles come in various types, such as electrons, quarks, and neutrinos.
Okay, now, again, neutrinos seem to be really like one of the modalities that interacts with our physical world that's closest to the pure potential modality or state of the background. Just so you know, I'm not going to get into all this, but that's what it actually is, and that's why I say, it can go faster than the speed of light, and it goes through all matter. Yeah, it's the closest to pure potential that we've been able to detect. It's that simple. It's that simple. But when they say, it's made up of particles, just like the other guy said, unless just like a ton of scientists say, and I'm quoting him basically, that what people are calling particles are actually just waves, and it's an emergent property from a background medium. Call it an ether if you would like. Yeah, you don't say.
They move throughout the universe and can interact by exchanging other particles. For instance, the exchange of photons mediates the electromagnetic force. All these distinct particles are accounted for in what we refer to as the Standard Model.
Yeah, and there are actual flat earthers who are supposedly supposed to debate me, but it seems like it never actually happens. But there are actual true earthers, quote unquote, that defend this Standard Model. But by the way, there's no such thing as the photon. There's no evidence for the photon whatsoever. You can get that exact same dot pattern that's observed in the double slit, for example, completely void of light. And what they call the electron dot pattern, an electron is also a reified particle. That's not real. You have to reify to even claim the photon's real. And the photon's nothing more than the intersection of the oscillating electric field and the oscillating magnetic field. So it's like this. That intersection, that event, that process, the intersection, it's an event. Okay? They call that event photon, and they claim that it's like some corporeal physical particle, but it's not. It's just an event. I have a lot to say about a lot of this stuff, so I'll try not to digress too much.
Which is presently our most precise mathematical description of the quantum world. It encompasses two primary categories of particles: fermions, which primarily constitute matter, and bosons, which mainly describe interactions. At first glance, one might assume that this is the ultimate theory, that the Standard Model encompasses everything. However, there is an interaction that this model unfortunately fails to account for: gravity on a large scale. We know that general...
There is a phenomena this model fails to account for, and it's the most important one, the presupposition that's required for the entire model to even begin to exist in theory. It's the fundamental creative force, the primary creative force of all things that coalesces everything into a sphere, even gas inside of a vacuum inexplicably, but it doesn't actually work. Seems legit.
Relativity describes gravity. Objects curve space-time, thereby attracting other objects. Similar to other types of interactions, we anticipate that the curvature of space-time consists of small particles at the quantum scale called gravitons, which are quanta of space-time curvature. Nevertheless, when we attempt to incorporate their graviton into the...
It's so funny. Look, experiments show that light is emitted from atoms with discrete energy levels, not continuous, hence the concept that light came in discrete packets. Really, would you like to cite the experiment that showed that light comes in discrete packets from atoms? That would be interesting, because I buried the first section of the oscillating magnetic and electric fields that make up the electromagnetic radiation spectrum. And in fact, it's an excitation of the background medium, concentrated excitation that becomes perceivable. It's nothing more than illumination of what is already there based on a perturbation or disturbance within that pure potential background.
Standard Model, the calculations yield absurd results with infinite values that cannot be eliminated. We are unable to describe gravity at the quantum scale.
This is actually a profound question here, Super Chat. Is light one-dimensional? When it hits a surface, becomes two-dimensional. 1929G, thank you for Super Chat. I would actually say what people call light is actually just illumination, which is a certain perceived version of the background. And the actual background is not dimensional, meaning it isn't Cartesianal. So how we describe dimensions, it doesn't apply to the background. It's non-Cartesian, which is Cartesian, just how our simple minds try to quantify and describe the ideas of like volume, and then you added a fourth dimension of time so that you can try to make your model work within heliocentrism. I would say doesn't become anything. Okay, the material interacts with the excitation, and then that interaction we perceive as that object being lit up. There is no physical corporeal entity traveling, hitting anything with Cartesianal dimensionality. There's no evidence for that. You could get into a lot more profundity with that, but I don't want to get distracted too much.
To tackle this predicament, physicists have been searching for new theories for over half a century. This is where the string theory comes in. The basic concept of the string theory is quite simple. In the Standard Model, particles are depicted as dimensionless points. We acknowledge that these points do not possess identical properties. In string theory,
right, dimensionless points that are physical particles. They're just hijacking the background and all of it. And by the way, they don't do this for no reason. It's because all the evidence, the precise measurements and observations and stuff, as some will tell you, quantum mechanics is the most experimentally valid field that exists. Well, we do make very precise, repeated, and replicated observations in quote-unquote quantum mechanics, and it just consistently shows that there's a pure potential background that's void of Cartesianal dimensionality.
we assume that this is merely an approximation. If we zoom in on the particles, we postulate that they are all composed of tiny strings, sometimes open and sometimes closed.
Okay, the string theory, it's basically like there's a giant background harp made of billions of strings and they vibrate. It's not entirely wrong in the sense, in my opinion, in the sense that there are longitudinal vibrational compressions and refractions, but yeah, like the compression and refraction.
$19.99 through Super Chat. Our bro Witsit and fam is moving at the end of the month. Let's show our support and make this journey happen easy on them.
Thank you, man. Run Boston, thank you for the super chat and the kind words. Yes, we are aiming to move at the end of this month. and it's been interesting to say the least, but we'll talk about it later. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna skip a little bit here because I didn't watch all this. I just wanted to show you that this guy just like dunks on it. So he's basically just gonna probably tell you a lot of the problems that people will pretend don't. Or this is all you'll hear back is, oh, Whitsitt thinks if he finds things at the cutting edge of science we don't understand, then it all must be wrong. Yeah, it is all wrong because the things we're discovering is showing that the fundamental assumptions are incorrect. All right, let's watch a bit of this. Einstein was wrong about our reality. Lex Freeman, which. Watch it. I'm manifesting right now. I will sit down on this guy's podcast and have a conversation with him about the Earth.
When you say space-time is doomed, is it the space? Is it the time? Is it the very hard-coded specification of 4 dimensions? Or are you specifically referring to the kind of perceptual domain that humans operate in, which is space-time? You think like there's a 3D. Like our world is 3-dimensional and time progresses forward, therefore 3 dimensions plus 1, 4D. What exactly do you mean by space-time? What do you mean by space-time is doomed?
Great. So this is, by the way, not my quote. This is from, for example, Nima Arkani Hamed at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, Ed Witten, also there, David Gross, Nobel Prize winner. So this is not just something the cognitive scientists, this is what the physicists are saying.
Yeah, the physicists are space-time skeptics.
Well, yeah, they're saying that, and I can say exactly why they think it's doomed, but what they're saying is that, because your question was, what aspect of space-time, what are we talking about here? It's both space and time, their union into space-time, as in Einstein's theory. That's doomed. Mm-hmm. And they're basically saying that even quantum theory, this is Nima Arkani Hamed especially, the notion of Hilbert space, which is really critical to quantum field theory, quantum information theory, that's not going to figure in the fundamental new laws of physics. So what they're looking for is some new mathematical structures beyond space-time, beyond Einstein's 4-dimensional space-time or supersymmetric version, geometric algebra signature 2,4 kind of. There are different ways that you can represent it, but they're finding new structures. And by the way, they're succeeding now. They found something called the amplituhedron. This is Nima and his colleagues. The cosmological polytope. There are these like polytopes, these polyhedra in multi dimensions, generalizations of simplices that are coding for example, the scattering amplitudes of processes in the Large Hadron Collider and other colliders. So they're finding that if they let go of space-time completely, they're finding new ways of computing these scattering amplitudes that turn literally billions of terms into one term. When you do it in space and time, because it's the wrong framework, it's just a user interface. That's now from the evolutionary point of view, it's just user interface. It's not a deep insight into the nature of reality. So it's missing deep symmetry. It's something called a dual conformal symmetry, which turns out to be true of the scattering data, but you can't see it in space-time. And it's making the computations way too complicated because you're trying to compute all the loops and Feynman diagrams and all the Feynman integrals. So see, the Feynman approach to the scattering amplitudes is trying to enforce 2 critical properties of space-time: locality and unitarity. And so when you enforce those, you get all these loops and multiple, different levels of loops. And for each, you have the notion of locality. You have something deeper, and it's capturing some symmetries that are actually true of the data. But then when you look at the geometry of the facets of these polytopes, then certain of them will code for unitarity and locality. So it actually comes out of the structure of these deep polytopes. So what we're finding is there's this whole new world now beyond space-time that is making explicit symmetries that are true of the data that cannot be seen in space-time.
Okay, pay attention, bro. This is, again, I know a lot of people are like, dude, we're so far in the pseudoscience. That's true, we are. But this is relatively speaking, and we're showing with specificity the flaws in this belief system and how it's a religion. If you still adhere to this, really pay attention to this because there is no way out of it.
And that is turning the computations from billions of terms to 1 or 2 or a handful of terms. So we're getting insights into symmetries, and all of a sudden the math is becoming.
Wait a minute. So there's a model that uses relativity in space-time, and in order to try to compute this evidence that we actually can tangibly and physically replicate and observe, it requires billions and billions of computations, but throwing it out, you can actually simplify it to a single computational equation that applies to the observations that can be replicated. I wonder which one we should lean towards.
simple because we're not doing something silly. We're not adding up all these loops in space-time. We're doing something far deeper. But they don't know what this world is about. So, they're in an interesting position where we know that space-time is doomed, and I should probably tell you why it's doomed, what they're saying about why it's doomed. But they need a flashlight to look beyond space-time. What flashlight are we going to use to look into the dark beyond space-time? Because Einstein's theory and quantum theory can't tell us what's beyond them. All they can do is tell us that when you put us together, space-time is doomed at 10 to the...
It's a pure potential state that is the background medium, and there has to be a primary mover within that medium. There's your theory of everything. It all is geometric. It's all vibrational displacement, i.e. pressure mediation. It's so hard to come up with a theory of everything. How are we ever going to do it?
Minus 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Beyond that, space-time doesn't even make sense. It just has no operational definition. So, but it doesn't tell you what's beyond. And so they're just looking for deep structures, like guessing. It's really fun. So these really brilliant guys, generic, brilliant men and women who are doing this work, physicists, are making guesses about these structures, informed guesses, because they're trying to ask, well, okay, what deeper structure could give us the stuff that we're seeing in space-time, but without certain commitments that we have to make in space-time, like locality. So they make these brilliant guesses, and of course, most of the time you're going to be wrong. But once you get one or two that start to pay off, and then you get some lucky breaks. So they got a lucky break back in 1986. A couple of mathematicians named Park and Taylor took the scattering amplitude for 2 gluons coming in at high energy and 4 gluons going out at low energy. So that kind of scattering thing. So it's like, apparently for people who are into this, that's sort of something that happens so often, you need to be able to find it and get rid of those because you already know about that and you need to. So you needed to compute them. It was billions of terms. And they couldn't do it, even for the supercomputers couldn't do that for the many billions or millions of times per second they needed to do it. So they begged, the experimentalists begged the theorists, please, you got it. And so Park and Taylor took the billions of terms, hundreds of pages, and miraculously turned it into 9. And then a little bit later, they guessed one term expression that turned out to be equivalent. So billions of terms reduced to one term, that so-called famous Park-Taylor formula, 1986. And that was like, okay, where did that come from? This is a pointer into a deep realm beyond space and time, but no one, what can you do with it? And they thought maybe...
Oh, I know what you can do with it. You can throw out your dogmatic religious presuppositions and accept that there's actually a primary mover within a fluid-like medium with pure potential, and that the Earth is in the center of this torus field that creates the geometric fractal nature of all things, which is a conjugate geometric expression that can literally be identified from the small to the big scale. What can you do with it? Oh, I don't know. Stop being a materialistic psychopath and just accept the evidence for what it states. Oh, there were billions of computations that could be more accurately denoted with an equivalent singular equation, and the supercomputers couldn't even work out the fantastical reified loops of space-time because it required billions and billions of computations, and we found out that there's actually a much simpler singular equation that does account for it, and it actually points to something significantly deeper that exists outside of these reified concepts called space and time. But what do you do with it? I think it's pretty obvious what you do with it.
It was a one-off, but then other formulas started coming up. And then eventually Nima Arkani Hamed and his team found this thing called the amplituhedron, which really sort of captures the whole, a big part of the whole ball of wax. I'm sure they would say, no, there's plenty more to do. So I won't say they did it all by any means. They're looking at the cosmological polytope as well. So what's remarkable to me is that 2 pillars of modern science, quantum field theory with gravity on the one hand, and evolution by natural selection on the other, just in the last 20 years, have very clearly said space-time has had a good run. Reductionism has been a fantastic methodology. So we had a great ontology of space-time.
It hasn't had a good run. It hasn't worked since its inception. And reductionism hasn't worked since its inception. So how's it been a good run? It's been a complete waste of time that resulted in intellectual stagnancy that plagues humanity and has serious, dire philosophical implications.
A great methodology of reductionism. Now it's time for a new trick. But now you need to go deeper.
Dude, it had such a good run that it doesn't work at all, and we had to just ignore the problems for over a century.
Is that two pillars of modern science? Methodology of space-time, a great methodology of reductionism. Now it's time for a new trick. But now you need to go deeper and show, but by the way, doesn't mean we throw away everything we've done, not by a long shot.
No, we shouldn't throw away the observational evidence. We should throw away the stupid, materialistic, presupposed, reified, interpretive framework so that we can actually make progress.
Idea that we come up with beyond space-time must project precisely into space-time, and it better give us back everything that we know and love in space-time, or generalizations. Or
new trick? How about no tricks this time? Yeah, I know, right? It's pretty funny.
Or it's not going to be taken seriously, and it shouldn't be. So we have a strong constraint on whatever.
If it can't do the same predictions as space-time, then it's not going to be taken seriously, and it shouldn't be. Oh, well, that's funny. So first of all, what you're implying is that we should actually hold on to something we know isn't true until you consider the replacement sufficient, because it can therefore explain all your other presuppositions you refuse to re-examine. How about we don't listen to you because you're ridiculous? Secondly, it's effortless to make every single prediction that space-time makes because he stole it from Henri Poincaré, and there's actually a Lorentzian etheric version of this geometry that's called space-time that is the exact equivalent of all physical predictions, which means it also is incorrect because there is a non-Cartesian background medium void of dimensionality that is pure potential, seemingly intrinsically tied to consciousness, not by the way, but that's super profound. And there's a primary mover within it, and that you cannot in any way bottle this up to a Cartesian concept of time and space. And that is the reality of the situation. I've said it many times. I'm not claiming to know all the answers. I am actually openly stating that this is such a profound idea that I think it begins to venture into Yah territory. Said, space and time are just concepts. It's not the universe which imposes space and time on us, but rather us who impose it on it.
On space-time. It needs to project into space-time. And whatever this deeper theory is, it may not itself have evolution by natural selection. This may not be part of this deeper realm. But when we take whatever that thing is beyond space-time and project it into space-time, it has to look like evolution by natural selection, or it's wrong. So that's a strong constraint on this work.
So even the evolution.
And what they mean by natural selection and evolution is that each individual entity or organism is built with information inside of it that can become active and react to its environment, which also necessitates a creator. People that make mistakes in evolution debates, I'm all over the place. You guys, I've been gone for a while, so you guys are getting the machine gun. You guys are getting all kinds of the people that creationists, the mistake that creationists make in evolution debates is they yield microevolution to people. No, that's a ridiculous term. They yield adaptation to people. No, okay, not in the evolutionary definition of adaptation. No, you don't get that, because the truth of the matter is whenever an organism reacts to its environment to better survive, which has been validated with epigenetics, by the way, it shows that that organism already had the capability to react to its environment beneficially, meaning it is actually proof of creationism because it requires some type of intentional sourcing for that information to be embedded into that organism and remain dormant until it is needed. It is actually proof of creation. There will never be a rebuttal to that either, by the way. So I'm giving you guys freaking just like death blows. Just say this to people and watch them freak out. They'll call you names. They'll change the subject. They'll just say, nuh-uh. They'll be like, prove it. Be like, wait, prove what? Did you comprehend what I just said? Can you rebut it? Can you interpret it? You'll just get all kinds of fallacies and diversions and obfuscation and attempts to discredit you and blah, blah, blah. That's how you know they can't rebut what you said. And that's why we get heliocentric, globalist, globalist consistently using those fallacies. It's basically a concession. It's like tapping out intellectually.
By natural selection and quantum field theory could be interfaces into something that doesn't look anything like you mentioned. I mean, it's interesting to think that evolution might be a very crappy interface into something much deeper.
That's right. They're both telling us that the framework that you've had can only go so far, and it has to stop. And there's something beyond. And that framework, the very framework that is space and time itself. Now, of course, evolution by natural selection is not telling us about like Einstein's relativistic spacetime. So that was another question.
And he goes on to describe, but rather it's the concepts of space and time we use to interpret everything. And Einstein just basically developed that into a physical application. This guy is a psychologist, and he has experience with certain physicists, cognitive science, evolution. So we have top tier evolutionists sitting here saying, oh, turns out what we thought about evolution and space-time and everything, these concepts, is actually kind of pointing to something much deeper, and that just seems to be some rigid, rudimentary interface that humans have come up with. Yeah, you don't say. You're trying to explain things that do not exist. They are nothing more than arrogant materialistic interfaces. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Okay, so I want to play a little bit more of this one, and then I'll just come chat with you guys.
Field that they have neither the time nor the inclination to revisit the historical and political context, the assumptions that were made, the clash of personalities, and the excellent arguments against the theory of relativity. Yet these are requirements of the scientific method when no progress is being made, a re-examination of how and why we accepted a theory. Scientists and mathematicians today assume that all that has gone before is flawless, and they can therefore proceed safely without a backward glance. They and most of their teachers remain unaware of the hidden, unstated assumptions that are inherent in every scientific field. With awareness, the mysteries of the universe, like dark matter and dark energy, can be seen as mere artifacts of the invalid concepts of relativity theory.
Correct.
In his 1916 work, The Foundation of the General Theory of Relativity, Einstein states, if a system of coordinates k is chosen so that in relation to it physical laws hold good in their simplest form, the same laws also hold good in relation to any other system of coordinates, k dashed, moving in uniform translation relatively to k. This postulate we call the special principle of relativity. Simply restated,
that is, of course, K prime.
This is the first postulate of special relativity. The laws of physics are the same in all inertial frames of reference. But orbiting planets and quantum experiments show that there is a real-time connection between widely separated matter in the universe.
Yeah. And it's, of course, what they call matter with their assumed distances. But the principle is still the same, is that things that appear to be much further away, they all are connected, and more specifically, they all move in specific relation to the Earth.
The fixed stars can be regarded as an absolute frame of reference, which returns us to classical physics and Ernst Mach's principle that relates the motion of the local inertial frame to the distant stars.
And if you are new, we have covered Mach's principle and how actually a geocentric stationary Earth is entirely viable even within the Newtonian Einsteinian frameworks. And in fact, if you believe in both of them, you must acknowledge that a stationary Earth is valid. Of course, we don't believe in any of those stupid, nonsensical ideas. It seems like everything's fluid-like and maybe plasma more dense, much more local and contained. Everything moves in relation with angular momentum around the Earth. Oh, how dare you. Word salad.
Inertial frames moving relative to each other will have different velocities with respect to the absolute frame of reference of the distant stars and are therefore not equivalent.
And let me actually point this out. My boy Alan from Space Audits just presented his presentation on Globebusters. And it specifically refutes this postulate, right? This special principle of relativity, the fundamental postulate that, of course, GR is then built upon. But then, by the way, he actually alters the other fundamental postulate, claiming that there is no unlimited validity that can be claimed for the finite constancy of light in a vacuum, which is the next postulate of special relativity. But what is so interesting is that this requires there be no preferred reference frame. That's what this is saying. All reference frames are equally valid. There is no preferred. Yet, to utilize what people call GPS, and you can ask Ron Hatch about this as well, there's a preferred direction on the Earth where the light propagates more effectively. So that debunks all of this. I mean, we haven't even been trying to debunk his theory because it doesn't even deserve to be granted the foundation as if it needs to be debunked. But it's impossible to even just kind of explain it without debunking it. It's that ridiculous.
And so the laws of physics are the same in all inertial frames of reference. But orbiting planets and quantum experiments show that there is a real-time connection between widely separated matter in the universe. The fixed stars can be regarded as an absolute frame of reference, which returns us to classical physics and Ernst Mach's principle that relates the motion of the local inertial frame to the distant stars. Inertial frames moving relative to each other will have different velocities with respect to the absolute frame of reference of the distant stars and are therefore not equivalent. Einstein's first postulate, his special principle of relativity, is invalid.
Yeah, and that's within their assumptions, because Mach also said that it was just an assumption that space was absolute and fixed in and of itself, and that assumption renders Newtonian application fundamentally fallacious and inept.
In 1907, Einstein realized that the feeling a person gets when being pulled to the Earth by gravity is identical in nature to that which he gets while accelerating. He dubbed this conjecture the principle of equivalence. However, with an absolute frame of reference, they are not equivalent. Of course, this doesn't begin to explain how gravity works. Einstein, with the help of a mathematician friend named Marcel Grossmann, confused the issue terminally by fiddling with the normal concepts of space and time. Mathematically, it may be permissible to label a graph of time intervals to read past, present and future, but physically there is only now. The passage of time is universal when all matter is connected in real time. Time cannot be slowed or sped up. It is dimensionless. It has no arrow. There is no space-time, no fourth dimension.
That's correct. It's merely conceptual. Literally, dude. What we call time is just how we quantify change and motion. And the way we quantify it comes from the motion we see in the sky. That is it. It is how we are limited to perceiving existence. We're like, oh, well, people die, people age, plants grow, plants die. The sky, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning, right? Like, it's just a concept.
In real time, at least on a galactic scale, should never have been in dispute, since Newton's law of gravity, which is derived directly from observations, is instantaneous. His well-known equation doesn't include time.
Boom! I didn't even watch this, dude. Check this.
That the universe is a system connected effectively in real time, at least on a galactic scale, should never have been in dispute, since Newton's law of gravity, which is derived directly from observations, is instantaneous. His well-known equation doesn't include time.
Dude, I'm giving you so many things that no one will ever rebut. Just like, watch this video, write down the times I said no one will ever respond to this, no one will ever rebut this. Just understand the phrases, and then when the subject comes on, bring the idea.